few short months ago, this Ram SRT-10 was rotting in a driveway where it hadn't moved in 3 years. I picked it up, ditched the Viper 10-cylinder in favor of a smaller but whinier engine out of a Dodge Demon, and the end result, it is fast. Like football field-sized burnout marks on the highway fast. Yet I still have no clue how much power this thing actually makes. So now it's time to put it through the gauntlet. The track, the dyno, and then it is a truck after all, so we have to make sure it'll still do truck things. Yeah, if it survives this episode, I'll be genuinely impressed. Now, before we even think about taking this thing to the track, we gotta solve our traction issue, and I think I know exactly where to start. That was much harder than I expected it to be. Anyway, the biggest drag radials I've ever seen is what I was getting at there. The drag radials you'd normally run on a car, they're somewhere between 26 and 28 inches tall. These guys, they're 30 inches tall. They're just comical on this thing. While they might not be a great fit on a race car, on a race truck, I think they're gonna be perfect. On this, they are a little bit smaller than what we have on it currently. Given that they're not any taller, I'm not worried about clearance vertically. What I am worried about though, clearance with the bed. These tires are not only a good bit wider, but the offset of the wheel's different, meaning it's gonna sit in just a little bit compared to our stock wheels, which are 22 inches. These guys, they're 17s, meaning I'm not even positive they're gonna clear our brake caliper. As you'd probably guess, there's no off-the-shelf drag wheel fitment for an old SRT-10 like this, so we had to just take our best guess and order what should, keyword there being should, work. I really don't think the camera's doing justice to just how close this brake caliper is to the wheel. To put it into perspective, if we stick our fancy feeler gauge in there, it'll hold itself in place. But if I swipe it around the barrel of the wheel, it does have clearance all the way through, so technically we should be good. Now, of course, things could heat up and expand once we get to using it, but worst case, we'll just shave the calipers down like we did on my ZR1. It seems that I have significantly overblown the chances of this contacting the bed. There's like, I don't know, an inch of space in there. Now, this isn't exactly why we decided to switch wheels here, but I'm not gonna turn down an automotive science experiment. 81 pounds. I mean, it makes sense. 22-inch wheels, street tire. These to the touch are significantly lighter. I'm gonna guess at least 10 pounds. Oh.
That's a lot.
All right, so more traction, hopefully at least, and we just dropped 40 pounds off the truck. Rubbing, it seems halfway decent. Yeah, we nailed this, and as much as I would like to say, yeah, we really did our homework, spec these out, and they fit perfectly, no, they were pretty much the only option. They just happened to work. Now that I'm thinking about it, if we're trying to go test this thing for traction,
You're gonna send it?
We should probably.
Oh my God.
Just to make sure. Well, it feels better. Okay.
Is it me or the front end looks higher now?
Well, yeah, the rear is sitting a little lower,
yeah.
so it's got to be higher. It's still laying down rubber.
You saw that?
First gear, outside of being in a prep drag strip, I'm not like so worried about it. Second gear and 480 transmission, we should be hooking up.
Okay.
For sure. Second gear. All right, that went. All right, maybe the tires needed to be really hot. So we even beaten on this thing a little bit. We don't have any scrapes on the barrel, the caliper, the wheel, none of that heated up enough. We did bring like half the parking lot home with us. I think the only place we have a little bit of rubbing is that inner fender liner there, but it seems like that's gonna clearance itself, and honestly, I'm happy to let it do so. Now, I just need you guys to hear me out on this one. Given that we spent the entirety of this episode trying to increase traction, the fact that the next little modification we're about to do is gonna do the complete opposite of that, I'm aware it doesn't make the most sense. But way back when I bought this truck, I set out with a list of goals. Most of them are pretty easy. I think we'll accomplish them without much of an issue. One of them, though, it's got me worried. Run a quarter-mile pass faster than a stock Demon, which is 965. As fast as this thing is, it's still a pig, obviously. I mean, it's a truck. So I don't think that we have enough power to get us to that mid 9-second pass. With nitrous, the only limitation we're going to have to how much power we can make is how hard we want to push this stock motor, which we'll probably find the limits of sooner than later.
I think it's about time we put in the big kit. I'm going to put in the largest nozzle we have.
As for mounting the bottle bracket, I decided to use this upper rail to the bed. It's significantly stronger than the thinner material down here.
That one is actually pretty inconvenient.
It's a horrible inconvenience. The only thing it's good for, I guess, is sitting stuff on it. But yeah, if you try to sit on the tailgate or something, it's a massive inconvenience. It sucks. Anyway, this. Oh, I know this isn't just about looks, but it does look awesome. The way these things mount are actually really cool. They just have these little brackets that go across the top, like that. And then the billet knobs that screw on. Boom.
I don't think they ain't going anywhere.
No, they ain't
right?
going anywhere. And this is one time we want to be very, very sure they're not going anywhere.
100%.
I'm digging the way this thing looks now. It looks like a race truck. We just got to make sure it's fast enough to back that up. Most projects, once you get up to the engine bay, that's where things kind of get difficult, but they do call nitrous easy power, and I guess it applies to the install as well. First thing we got to do is mount up our solenoids. This is a Hellcat specific kit, so it bolts right onto the blower lid here. The solenoids, that's going to be what tells the nitrous to go, but we have to give it a way to get inside the engine. And we're going to do that the same way we did on the Demon with the throttle body plate. I'm not going to get too super in depth about how this works, being that we just did this same exact install on the Demon, but the gist of it, nitrous goes in that nozzle, fuel would go in there if you chose to run fuel in addition through the throttle body plate, and those little holes in the top of the plate, that's where it all comes out. The plate, it's called a throttle body plate for a reason. It's because it bolts in between the throttle body and the supercharger, or an intake manifold if you're doing it on a naturally aspirated car. Now we got two solenoids here, the first of which is going to be the one that injects nitrous into the engine, and that is going to be regulated through this little restrictor pill. We're going to be running about a 75 shot, and I say about because I genuinely don't know what it's going to be. So we should pick up about 75 horsepower. Normally when you're installing a shot of nitrous like this, you would use the fuel port as well. Most fuel systems can't keep up with the added fuel demands of nitrous, but since we have such a gnarly fuel system on this thing from the jump, we're just going to let it ride. This is what they would call a dry shot. One thing I didn't really think about is how this is going to affect our intake fitment. And luckily, it doesn't that much. It is rubbing the radiator hose a little more now, but we're just going to have to live with it. I know one would think that because this is the solenoid that's going to turn nitrous into horsepower, that'd be the fun one. But the other one, that's the one that puts on a show. I know it's hard to believe, but it's not just for showing off. It's called the purge, and the whole purpose of this is to sacrifice a little bit of nitrous to get rid of all the air in the lines. Now, the last bit of plumbing we have to do is connect our front side to our backside. And this might actually be the hardest part of this whole deal to do cleanly. We have a Y coming off the bottles. It goes to a single -6 line. It's about, I don't know, 10 feet long. We got to run it between the bed and the cab, down under the car, and then up into the engine bay, while making sure we don't come into contact with anything hot or spinning. So this is where our line comes down, and now that I'm under here, I think we actually have a pretty good way to run this. There's a wiring harness that comes from the back of the truck all the way up to the engine bay, and though it runs kind of close to the exhaust, it hasn't melted the shrouding yet. The closest part of the exhaust to it's a muffler. It's not like it's raw exhaust pipe, so it has a little bit less heat to it. I think we're just gonna try to follow that. One other added bonus of running our lines under here is it gives us the perfect spot to splice in our nitrous pressure sensor. Say your bottle pressure is too low, all of a sudden your 100 shot turns into more like a 50 shot. So being able to verify our bottle pressures between, say, 800 and 1000 PSI, it's going to be critical to making this whole thing work. And with that in place, we can make our final run up into the engine bay which is turning out to be a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. We ran over the frame rail there, where we were able to run the nitrous line parallel with the brake lines. It's 6 inches plus away from the header. It really couldn't have worked out any better. That'll wrap up the plumbing side of things. Now we just have to wire it all up, which usually isn't the most fun, but this time I pre-built harnesses for it, and just like everything else in this truck, it's going to be controlled by the Holley ECU. Each solenoid needs a power and a ground. For the ground, we're going to run it right here in the engine bay because, well, why not? For the positive side, this one has to run in the car, and we're going to use basically the same relay setup that we powered the fuel pump, the water pump, the radiator fans, all that good stuff on. Except this one's gonna be half the size because we're out of room on our ECU bracket. Now is when we find out if we forgot to, tighten a fitting or something. Nothing spraying. I don't care how many times I do that, it's always awesome. With the hood closed in that 45-degree fitting on the end of it, it was kind of spraying up through the grills, and a lot of it was ended up down here on the paint, which I really don't want. So we're gonna make a little revision to how we mounted this. I swapped the 45-degree fitting up top on the solenoid, now with the straight on the bottom, instead of clamping it to here, which looks kind of janky. I'm gonna try to run it through these fins on the radiator. Yeah, that's problem solved. That's way better. Not only can we purge without messing up our paint, I just think this is a much more elegant solution aesthetically from the front as well. So that'll square away the nitrous, and if I'm being honest, that was supposed to be the end of the work we're doing to this truck in this episode. We're just gonna go racing, go to the dyno, have a bunch of fun. But yesterday we took the Demon to the track, and it was horrendously slow. It was an ugly day. It was blistering hot. There wasn't enough ice in the state to keep the Demon cool. So I got to thinking, what's gonna happen when we take the truck to the track and don't have a way to put ice in it? After all, it's inevitable that some events, some track days are just gonna fall on really hot days. And currently, we just have this heat exchanger, we have a factory Hellcat expansion tank, and that's it. At the very minimum, we need an ice box on this truck. Maybe we'll even do an interchiller down the road. My original thought, of course, was to plop an ice tank down in the bed of the truck, run lines up to the front, and call it a day. But then I got to looking around the engine bay, and I think we can tackle this a little bit differently. If we axe this tank here, look how much room we have underneath of it. But to take advantage of all that space we have in there, a universal one, it's just not gonna work. So I'm thinking we just build our own. One of my main goals here, other than, well, preventing this thing from melting down, is to not have some big giant box in the engine bay that looks out of place. So I made some angled cuts here on my official cardboard test mule, and I think we should have something that's fairly aesthetically pleasing at least. The way I drew it up, we have like 10 inches of clearance before we hit either the fender lining or this part of the radiator, and based on the rough math, that should give us like 4.5 gallons of volume. Now comes the fun part though, converting this from a theoretical cardboard ice tank to something that functions. All right, we got our basic outline done here. Theoretically, once we clean these pieces up, all we need to do is stand them up, weld them together, boom, we have our ice box. But there is one little contraption we need to build for the inside. This hole here, that's gonna be a -12 fitting that we weld to the bottom. That's gonna feed our pump. So when we pack this thing full of ice, it's conceivable that a single piece of ice could block it and jam up our whole system. Most of the commercially available ice boxes, they have something to protect against that. So what we're gonna do is make our own little box to protect what I guess we'll call the sump of this tank. With that guy in there, that should prevent any piece of ice that's big enough to actually cause a problem from ever making it to the pump.
Really not that bad. The combination of the different angles makes for a little bit of difficulty, but
Trickiness.
Yeah, trickiness. What I'd like to see done is decrease the AC frequency of the welder in order to get better penetration through the corners, rather than, you see how there's no bubble on the back side. So that's a full pass.
Perfect.
Yes. Very professional. Semi-pro.
Bravo! All right, the box is pretty good and welded up. You can definitely tell the parts that I did, but we're not going to talk about that. Now we got to weld in our drains. I say drains, but what I really mean is I try to manhandle this hot box, our inlet, our outlet, and our drain. We already know where the outlet's going. That's right below the cheese grater there. The inlet, though, I mean, it's got to go in that top corner. Yeah, right about there. Because it's going to come from that top hose running through that cable clamp right there. Yeah, go ahead and mark an X on that. Looks good to me. Then the drain, that's kind of the tricky one. It's all going to be about what's most convenient for us to hit and where we want it to come out. I'm thinking we might be able to go straight down in the front. For all intents and purposes, this thing's pretty much done. We have 2 brackets coming off the top that goes to this upper frame rail type section, and then 1 thicker bracket on the bottom that uses 2 bolts. Now, if I really wanted to, we could just slap the lid down on here, seal it all up, adapt our lines, and call it a day. But this thing's freaking ugly. Made this out of a big sheet of raw aluminum we had kicking around the shop for like 2 years now. It's all banged up. So I'm gonna take this over and get it Cerakoted. While we're waiting for that, we have just one last really special part to toss on the car. You guys might have noticed the breather ports on the valve covers, they've just been left open since we built this thing, and that's because I've been waiting on this. Our friends at Improved Racing have been developing this for a little bit now. It's the CCR catch can. It's a race version. It's a bit bigger than the street version I've been running on all the other builds. And on this one, well, they put a real nice little touch on it.
For mounting, we kind of have the perfect place in this little indentation on the fuse box. The can itself has this upper collar that rotates around 360 degrees, which allows us to mount in any orientation we want. For our lines, on the valve cover side, I stuck with the stock plastic clip-on style fittings, and on our catch can, I went with -10 push locks. It looks so sick, and honestly, the fact that we're not going to be spraying oil out of our valve covers onto our firewall any longer, that's kind of just an added bonus.
And now we can wrap up this ice tank. And I do have to admit, I was a little bit on the fence of getting this thing Cerakoted versus a traditional powder coat. You can see exactly how thin this stuff is. It doesn't clog up any of the welds, which also means it shows every imperfection, and powder coat can kind of hide some of that stuff. Not that, you know, there's imperfections in my welding or anything. Prior to Cerakoting it, they sandblasted it. They took all the scrapes, the scratches, everything out of that metal. It looks 10 out of 10 perfect. The way we're gonna do this, go ahead and get our tank mounted up. This should give us a nice solid working surface. Go ahead and attach our lid. Now to seal the mounting ring for the cap to the tank, we're gonna use the same sealant we use on pretty much everything that needs to be sealed. I'm talking, I don't care what fluid I come in contact with sealed, I don't care what the temperature is, I'm not a leak-in type sealed. I might not be able to show you, but we have the perfect amount of sealant pushing through all the way around the inside and the outside. I have no doubts that's going to seal perfectly fine. Now, while we're waiting for that sealant to harden a little bit, why don't we go ahead and run our lines. The last piece of the puzzle is our drain valve, which has -8 male fittings on both sides, and coincidentally, our icebox has a male -8 fitting as well, meaning we needed to join them together, and I didn't have a standard female to female -8, so I dismembered this rollover valve for a fuel cell. Turns out it works pretty perfectly. Definitely not what it was meant for. That's how half this truck was built after all. What do you think? She gonna leak?
I don't know. This all depends how much you trust yourself.
Oh, I trust myself. Not at welding tanks, but I trust myself in other areas. So I guess just fill it up and find out. So theoretically, when Tim hits powder this, the pump over there, that's gonna suck down a lot of what we just put in. And once it pushes the air out, the return's gonna start spraying in from right there. She's spitting. She's spitting. All right, good. It didn't blow anything up on our top ring. It's not leaking. It's working exactly like we wanted it to. It looks a hell of a lot better than the plastic tank sitting there. Now, one of the best parts about this compared to the stock tank setup is you no longer need to worry about bleeding. The way this returns, it's essentially self-bleeding. Might have took longer than I originally anticipated, and it might have been a massive learning experience, but I gotta say, I'm pretty freaking thrilled with the way this thing turns out. Except, well, the alignment of that cap. Really, I should have screwed it into this ring before I placed it in the tank and situated this bolt right about down there, but hey, is what it is at this point. Let's go hit the dyno. Go make one little test hit just to, you know, see where she's at before we really get tuning on it. All right. Check that out. I didn't realize it was touchscreen. Anyway, I hope you guys saw that. 906 pounds of torque, super early on, 700 horsepower, and we haven't even started with it yet. It's gonna be a good day, Fernando.
I think we're gonna hit 1,000.
I don't think we're gonna hit 1,000. I honestly don't know what it's gonna make. 800, 900. The torque on this thing is un-fucking real. We had a little issue where it's downshifting into second automatically. Just cleared that up and it made less power because we just heat soaked the hell out of it trying to figure out why it was downshifting.
There's a fire over there.
Fire?
You should
Oh.
see it in the video. It was sick.
I mean, then it's already a win. No matter how much power it makes, you shoot flames. That's what we all want, right? Our ice tank, it's great. It is ice cold. Look at the outside, Fernando. It's all frosted up. It's working exactly like we intended it to, but there is one issue. If we drain this tank completely and then turn the system on, even if it's filled with ice, we'll airlock our pump over there. So we had to crack the lower fitting on that to get it back. It wasn't doing anything. Overall, not a big deal, just something we have to be conscious of in the future. Otherwise, it's working great. Go. So 1,001 torque, I'm not positive that's right. I think the dyno's doing something weird down low, maybe because of the converter, maybe because it's an automatic. 800 without the nitrous. Can't be mad at that, especially being stock bottom end, unlike the Demon, not a ported blower. Now, get to crank this stuff up, have some real fun. We're still not sure that torque's right. I'm not gonna claim this thing makes 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, but it looks cool in the chart, right? 865 through an automatic transmission, Fernando.
I'm happy.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier with this. Keep in mind, this is a stock bottom end. It's not built like the Demon. It's an auto transmission. The Demon only made 140 more horsepower. I'll take it. I'll take it all day. Let's go see how fast it is. Great to be back at the track, don't it, Fernando?
Are you ready to make it faster or no?
Yeah, this last week, you know, the whole Demon thing, that didn't really go so well. Today, though, I'm feeling it. What's your prediction? First pass?
10 seconds.
10.9?
10.5.
10, that's aggressive. First pass. 10.9. Very important note compared to last week at the track with the Demon. It is nice out. It's beautiful. It's like 80 degrees, not humid. We shouldn't be beat by the heat this time. Red line a good bit during tuning today because it was getting really spicy. I felt it multiple times there, hit rev limit. I guess I wasn't quick enough on the shift. Second to third it did it, and then at the very top of the track it did it as well, which is gonna be something we'll have to figure out. Thank you. Let's go.
awesome, guys.
This one
Oh
is
my
fake or
God.
not?
10-9. Wait, I called that, didn't I? I did
Yes.
call 10-9. All right, there we go. 125 miles an hour, the 60-foot, 159. That, for leaving off the foot brake, basically idle, it's awesome. Yeah, there's nothing sprayed all over the engine bay. No weird smells. Yeah, this worked out all right for the first pass. Again, just like the Demon, we didn't even check the tire pressure. It's something like 20 pounds. This is a great first run. This is really, couldn't have worked out any better. I'm sure you guys can tell how excited I am about it.
Yeah, honestly, I was pretty nervous about the dry shaft.
I was
But it hooks pretty good.
That's why I left so soft.
Yeah.
Now, when I talk about leaving off the foot, whoo, that's hot. All right, anyway. Now, when I talk about leaving off the foot brake, that means at the line, I'm just hitting the brake, the gas a little bit at the same time, letting off and going. It's the softest way you can possibly leave with an automatic car. No trans brake, we're literally leaving at 1,500 RPMs, just like you would off a red light, we're just flooring it. I thought this thing was gonna spin horrendously. It didn't. It didn't spin at all. There is one major problem though. As good as this all is, in third gear, which is the last gear we can use when we're actually on a racetrack, not fourth because that's overdrive, we're banging the rev limit at roughly 125 miles an hour. From the factory, these trucks will do like 150, 160, but of course we changed the transmission. It's a 480, but we didn't change the rear gear. These do come with an incredibly high rear gear ratio. It's a 456, so there's a lot of room to go down. And I do know that the 2004 quad cabs came with a 410 rear. Maybe that's our ticket. I knew it was a possibility that at some point we were gonna have to do that. That's no longer a possibility. We're gonna have to do it. In fact, I was planning on taking this thing roll racing tomorrow. We really can't do that anymore. Either way, it's not gonna stop us from doing what we were supposed to do tonight. We're gonna try to ice this thing, see if we can get it to 125 miles an hour, just a little faster. I think it has, I don't know, what do you think, Fernando? 10.7, maybe a 10.6 in it?
I would say 10.5.
10.5. I mean, I was banging off rev limit a little bit. We just gotta go find out, because honestly, I don't know.
Making some changes?
You could say that. Yeah, so the solution for now, being that we can't change a rear gear in the moment here at the track, is undo that little red line drop that Rick did for us earlier. I called him and verified with him. He said, go for it, but if you blow it up, it's on you. I'm willing to take that risk, okay?
I don't believe he said that. He's like, no, keep it the way it is. You're about to blow up that in 1,000 pieces.
Word for word, reap what you sow, and he'll back me up on this, all right? So we're gonna go from 7,000 here. We're gonna go from 7,000, now we'll raise it 200 RPMs. All right, let's let her eat. When I said let her eat like 2 hours ago, what I meant to say was we're gonna wait 2 hours and then we're gonna let her eat. It is packed here tonight. The way it's looking, we're only getting 2 runs, so we better make this one count. If it breaks or I screw something up now, we're basically going home with that 10.9. Let's hope that's not the case. This truck. I genuinely think this is proof that it's not always the fastest cars that are the most fun. Build some big, goofy, dumb 5,000-pound truck, and it's awesome. 10.6, 128 miles an hour, a 151 60 foot. That's awesome. That's really, it's way better than the Demon. Way better. See, the nitrous, it's off. I'm not lying. We still got some more to go. We just got to change the rear gear. I'm excited for this. We finally knocked off our first goal that's been on the roof of this car since like a day after I bought it. Real simple, make a quarter-mile pass, done, and it went awesome. Now this one below it, the make a quarter-mile pass faster than a stock Demon at 965, yeah, we'll work on that. We really only need to pick up 1 complete second, which in the grand scheme of things, a second doesn't sound that bad, but it's a lot. We got some work to do. Either way, before we can tackle any of that, we have
one more test we got to put this thing through. We built ourselves a fast truck. Now we got to see if the truck will still truck, if you know what I mean. Now, typically, a hitch would go like this. Trucks sit pretty high. You have to have the ball a little bit lower than the typical hitch mount, but on ours, we're going to have to take it the other way. Because we lowered this thing to the ground, we now need to raise this up and have a trailer that sits pretty much above or level to our bumper. I think off the rip, we'll try this whole thing right about here. Maybe we'll have to adjust it once we actually connect the trailer to it. Now, in the interest of safety here, we are going to make a few changes before we tow with it. I guess we can kind of consider it going from track mode back to street mode. First and foremost, the drag radials coming back off. I don't think it's a wise idea to be towing on a 17-inch wheel with this kind of soft sidewall on it. It probably wouldn't act the best. It might also destroy our radials. In addition to our stock wheels going back on, we're gonna lock these shocks down. We're going full hard with it. I don't know that that's the right call, but it seems like a good idea. Watch this. To be clear, there's no good reason that this shouldn't tow perfectly fine. The chassis is still the same as when it came off the factory floor. We haven't really hacked anything up, chassis-wise at least. It just seems sketchy. I'm pretty sure this is gonna go perfectly fine. You can definitely feel the weight. It feels heavy. It doesn't feel like, say, towing with a diesel, but in the parking lot at least, it feels good enough. I freaking love this truck. Like I said back at the shop, I didn't have any reason to believe that this wouldn't tow well, but it does tow really, really well. The shocks, the QA1s, they feel phenomenal. It's not harsh, it's not bouncy. At speed like this, it doesn't feel like you're dragging something behind you, at least with an empty trailer. The load we're gonna put on it's well within what this truck's rated to tow from the factory. Keyword there, of course, being from the factory. If we have an issue, I suspect it'll be then. I will say this might have more to do with the fact that the shocks are cranked all the way up to stiff, but on rough country roads like this, not a highway, it is pretty bouncy.
It's not bad, right?
No, I really don't think there's a time I've got out of this truck from trying something new that I just haven't had a big dumb smile on my face. This thing's so good. It's so good.
Oh.
While we're here anyway, we might as well give a quick update on Fernando's car. If you haven't seen this, you need to go watch the video. We'll put the link in the description. If you have, well, it's made a lot of progress since last time, but we'll leave it at that for now. Pray for me. Yeah, right off the rip, the weight is noticeable. But if you've ever towed a car on a trailer like this, it's say a mid-2000s F-150 or Ram 1500, a Silverado, it feels exactly like you would expect. Now in a stock truck, won't be worried about it at all, but it just feels, I don't know, a little bit harsh and abusive, given that this is not really what I built this truck for, even if we are gonna tow with it occasionally. Either way, once you're up to speed, it feels good. It feels good enough. Now, I do suppose that since we're out here in the middle of nowhere, oh my God, that was a long burnout. All right, everything I said about the truck, you know, not feeling great, you know, things feeling abusive, don't worry about it. I ain't worried about it. You guys shouldn't worry about it. Fernando ain't worried about it. We're good. putting out the speed on the highway, you can really feel that weight merging onto it. But it just is what it is. I'm not laying into it. I'm trying to do that kind of stuff as gingerly as possible. That way she's in tip-top shape for us to go out and not be ginger of it. You know, when we don't have a car attached to the back.
We made it.
I'm not gonna call it effortless, but it's easily a 9 out of 10. This truck is just freaking awesome. I know when I set out to build this truck like, what, 3 months ago now, I said I wasn't really a truck guy. This was my first ever truck build. I'm finding it very, very hard to not love doing this.
I wonder what happened to these tires.
Yeah, towing it definitely screwed up the tires a little bit. They're all ragged out now. That's kind of, I guess that's the downside to towing a truck that's, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that it's lowered or something.
Just the weight.
Ah, yeah, it does seem there's a little rubber on the back of this truck too. Yeah, we'll have to do something about that and hit it with a power washer or something.
I was supposed to put marks on it.
Yeah. I put burnout rubber on your car before you can. I'm quite proud of that, if we're being honest. I guess we really shouldn't do all this talking for you. Make sure it's still in one piece.
What about, is it overheat?
It did heat up a little bit, but only on the burnout. It got to like 230, which is pretty high. As soon as we picked back up going, it was down to like 215. It was perfectly fine. It doesn't always work this way, but this time I genuinely just think we built a really nice truck. Now though is when I'm gonna ask you guys for some help. I have two things I really wanna do with this truck. Number one, chase that 965 quarter-mile pass. Do we take weight out of it? Do we do that 410 gear swap? And do we keep pushing it? Or do we paint it and do we make it look nice? I wanna knock both those things out. I just don't know which order to do them in. So let me know what you guys wanna see.
Option 3, get the Z done.
Yeah, we're doing that anyway. We're literally doing that this week, and that's not going to be a problem. Either way, this truck's awesome. I love it. It couldn't have worked out better. Hit him.
Adios. Was a success. I got you a minute. Safety first, right?
Yeah. The motto of this place.